Hi, welcome to the BioPharma Finder help videos. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the new features in 3.1, which involve the intact workbook and exporting this information to Chromeleon 7.2.9 for performing deconvolution in our compliance software. So on your screen, you'll see the BioPharma Finder 3.1 intact deconvolution workflow, and I'm showing you the process and review page. To see how to do the intact deconvolution, please see some of the other videos. From here, I've deconvoluted a trastuzumab native dataset, and you can see the results. And what we're going to do is, in the results table, I've selected some components that I'm interested in monitoring in the Chromeleon software, and I'm going to add those to an intact workbook. To do that, I select the checkboxes, right-click, Save as intact workbook. I'm going to hit check. We're going to say trastuzumab native, and I'm going to save. Now in the 3.1, you're going to see a new tab that's called intact workbook. Click on the workbook. And the software is going to take us to the Workbook Manager. We were in the editor, but now let's look at the manager. And you can see that I've added the native trastuzumab workbook. I also have another one in here that I created earlier. So if I, from the manager page, you can edit, you can delete, or you could export a workbook to Chromeleon. So if you select one of your workbooks, you can click export. So I'm going to go ahead and do this now. And let's export this workbook to the desktop. I'm just going to save it, and the software has exported it now. And let's open it up and see if we can take a look at it. So inside of the workbook, you have all your parameters, which are very important for deconvolution. And the workflow for this is really to take your data in BioPharma Finder, do your initial deconvolution, optimize all your parameters in the BioPharma Finder software. Where you have a lot more flexibility in figuring out what the best parameters are for your data. And then you want to take that information to Chromeleon and do the deconvolution. Review your parameters here. You can right click, you can have a export to Excel or export to Word. You can also select specific components that you'd like to export, or you can delete components if these are turning out that you're not interested in monitoring all of the components that are in your workbook. So these are the new features in BioPharma Finder. Now let's go to Chromeleon and see how we might use those. So this is Chromeleon 7.2.9. And to begin, I'm going to bring in the raw files into Chromeleon, because in this example, or my computer, I'm not attached to a mass spectrometer, so I didn't do any acquisition. So I'm going to bring in 4 files. I'm going to click Open, and I'm going to import these raw files into the Chromeleon software. Now, once you have the raw files into Chromeleon, you're going to convert them. Oh, I already have an experiment called, so this is going to put a auto renaming for me. So now you'll see I have a new sequence. Now you'll notice in this sequence that the truck is blue. This is telling me that I've imported these raw files, and I need to convert the raw files. When I convert them, the truck will turn yellow. And so now you can see that they've been converted. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and open up the studio. Now once you're inside the studio, if you've added the intact deconvolution license to Chromeleon, you'll see a new tab. So intact protein deconvolution. From here, you can do several different ways of processing data or performing deconvolution. You could choose from one of the 5 different default methods, where these are similar to what you have in BioPharma Finder, our default methods there, but you do have limited flexibility in the parameters and optimization. So we recommend that you bring in a workbook from BioPharma Finder where you've already optimized the method, so that when you import in this way, it'll bring in those parameters for you. Now, the other way that you can process this, if we want to actually target those specific components, so remember, not only do we have parameters, but we have components that we are interested in monitoring in Chromeleon, we're going to do an import. So if we want to do the import, we select import, and we find our workbook, that's the native one, and we open. Now when we do this, what's going to happen is we're going to bring in our parameters, plus we're going to bring in our targeted components. Now part of bringing in the targeted components, what happens is the Chromeleon software, if we go to the data processing tab, is automatically going to bring these components in for us. And it's bringing in the information from BioPharma Finder. It's bringing in the charge states, it's bringing in the observed charge states, and it's bringing in the retention time. So when it does that, we can actually look for those specific charge states in the chromatograms. Now, in order to do that, we need to change the view. This is the default view that you'll see. We can change this. We're going to add the processing method. And when we click processing method, you'll notice up on the ribbon, we now have processing method. We can click here. We can change this, because this is mass spec data, to MS quantitation analysis with mass spec data. Once we've done that, we're going to have a different results table down below. Let's go back to our data processing menu, and we're going to add in, at this point, we're going to add MS components. So we add our MS components. Okay, now we have some new views. Now if we click on the MS component table, and if you look at this in detail, these are the targeted components that we brought in. If you double click on one and go to the extracted ion chromatogram, you'll see that the MS quantitation peaks are the different charge states that were observed in BioPharma Finder. So if we actually go back and look for BioPharma Finder, and if you expand this information, you'll see these are the masses of the charge states. Okay, so we saw 24 through 29. This information for this identification was automatically imported into the Chromeleon software. Okay, so if we close that. Now one thing that Chromeleon is going to do is it's going to do component detection. So it's trying to find these mass to charges based on our MS setting parameters that we've defined, and I haven't optimized anything here, but for your intact data you might need to optimize the parameters, which I'm not going to show it in this video, but I can show it another time. So I'm going to expand the retention time here. So I opened this up a little bit so that we have a bigger window. And when you click on the different components, you'll see the top peak is the MS quantitation peak, and each individual trace down below are the individual charge states. Again, this is all automatically brought into the Chromeleon software. So if you click here, okay, so in terms of identifying these, you'll notice that Chromeleon provides you some green check marks or red X's. So the red X's indicates that the components were not detected. The green check marks indicates that the components are detected and they're confirmed. So how do you confirm a component? There's a composition scoring in this processing method, and if we click on that, we have the MS criteria, and we have specific criteria for intact deconvolution. Now you can build your own acceptance criteria here. I'm just going to show you one example that I'm going to use, where I'm going to use the component mass. Let's see if I can find component mass, so the molecular mass here, and I'm going to just simply subtract the mass from the intact deconvolution, and I'll show you that in a second. And I'm going to look for a difference that's less than 10 here. So this is going to be our new criteria, scoring criteria for the deconvolution. Now you'll notice nothing has happened here because we haven't run the actual deconvolution yet. So let's go back to our intact protein deconvolution and let's deconvolute this. So when we do that, we're going to say start all. Now what's happening is the software is going through and using the BioPharma Finder parameters to do the deconvolution. Okay, so now we've done the deconvolution. We're going to score all of our injections, and I need to change so we can see our evaluation status. And so now you see that we're getting green check marks. Okay, so what the software has done, just to review, we brought in our raw files from that we want to monitor our components that we exported from BioPharma Finder in a intact deconvolution workbook. We brought along with our components, we brought our parameters, so we don't have to adjust any of the parameters. We then define some acceptance criteria to determine whether the components are present or not, and we actually do the deconvolution. So on this page, what we're looking at is we're comparing the deconvoluted results and determining whether our components are in our files. Now, when we go to the data processing page, we're doing something a little bit different, where we're actually looking for the individual charge dates for these components inside of the raw data. So from here, you're actually measuring and getting an area amount based off the charge dates. So this is different than using the deconvoluted data. So one very nice thing in the Chromeleon software is you're able to get area values based off the raw charge dates. So again, raw data, raw mass spec data, looking at the charge states, you get an area calculation. And then if you go back to the intact deconvolution, you'll actually get, you could use the intensities here from the deconvoluted values. So you have two pieces of information if you want to figure out the quantity. Now you may ask, well, why are these results not in spec? And the reason is because it's not able to detect all of our components. So one way we could do that is we could improve the peak picking. And so if you notice, if I click on this component, you'll see that the charge states, the peak picking is not very good for this charge state. So you could go in and optimize the settings. But for this video, what I'm going to do is actually just delete these from our list. And so now you'll see that we're detecting all four of these most abundant components. If we go back, and now you'll see that we do this, and we're going to score all injections. Oh, and we're seeing them all except this one. We're not seeing them. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful, and this is just a quick overview of how you can use the new features in BioPharma Finder 3.1, which is our intact protein workbook, and how you can take that information, bring it to Chromeleon, and this is Chromeleon 7.2.9. and how you can perform intact deconvolution in Chromeleon, and how you can look for targeted components, where you can also do the deconvolution, and you can also look for those components at the raw level data using different charge dates. Hope you find this helpful. Thank you.